this is going to be an unusual video. I usually don't do gossip or comment on internet drama. But I believe that this has actual relevance now, because I am seeing people wondering what happened to Candace Owens. Why did she go crazy? The answer is that nothing happened to her. She is the same Candace Owens that she always was, and you were just not paying enough attention. Her current behavior took me back to 2017, back when she became a rising star on YouTube, and in the conservative movement, a black woman who used to be part of the woke left and then turned against it. Even back then, people were already suspecting her sincerity, pointing to questionable aspects of her story. I, back then, found her story to be weird and amusing, so I did a little digging and realized that the true story was even more ridiculous than I thought. But this story, even though it was well documented at the time, was kind of lost in the shuffle and forgotten by history. No one, as far as I know, ever told the story in full, in any kind of media. Since it isn't my thing, I never did either. But I saved the stuff in a folder, in case it ever became more than just gossip. Well, now she's doing something very similar to what she did back then, but now it is a lot more than some local internet drama. For one thing, she is much bigger now. For another, what she is doing is part of an internal war within the American right that might have ramifications for the future of America. I think this story can shed some light on her current behavior, and it is time to dig it up and tell it in full. So, just this once, we are doing SlopTube in here. In today's video...
So this is all happening to you. When did you start piecing it together?
Instantly. I pieced it all together instantly, and I realized that my friends were my enemies and my enemies were my friends. I think it is a circumstance where we just know. We just know that he was truly betrayed.
For those who weren't following, Candace Owens is now claiming that the murder of Charlie Kirk was some great conspiracy, apparently involving his organization Turning Point USA, the Donald Trump administration, and the Jews, who all conspired together to get rid of him, because they didn't like the direction he was about to head.
I think it is a circumstance where we just know. We just know that he was truly betrayed in one of the most egregious ways that I think I've ever seen. It has made me lose faith in politics. It has made me fully lose faith in Trump. And my heart aches for the fact that he gave so much of his life to Trump and to politics. And they just were like, nope, that is it. It serves us or it doesn't serve us, and we want to move on. And so here's a holiday. Bro, if they try to give me a holiday, what is with them giving people a holiday after they kill them? Why is that a thing? You know what I mean? They're like, oh, Martin Luther King, what about this holiday? What about this boulevard? Anyways, let me knock it off. Like, they're going to give Charlie Kirk a boulevard. They already did. They did in Israel. They gave him a freaking boulevard. It's like, as soon as they give you a boulevard and a holiday, they definitely killed you. There's no question. They killed you. There's no way. That's like their signature thing. It's like that's what they do. It's the Fed signature. It's how they sign off after they murder you. So like holiday and a boulevard. And it's never on the nice side of town either. Like Charlie Kirk Boulevard is not going to be on the nice side of town.
I don't watch Candace, so I don't know the entire theory, but I get snippets here and there, and her theory seems to be just as unfounded and unhinged as it sounds. But this is not what I want to talk about. I want to take you back to a time when she did something very similar, to show that this pattern of behavior isn't something new to Candace, but just her back to her old tricks. There really is just one essential difference between then and now. What she is doing now is tragic and disgusting. What she did back then was pure comedy gold. And there have been some channels that told the story over the years, but they treated it seriously and glossed over the more ridiculous parts. So, even if you are familiar with the overall story, you may want to stick around for this. We are going back to early 2016, when Candace Owens is in her mid-20s, working in finance. She wasn't part of the online woke community, what back then we called social justice warriors, or SJWs. But, having studied journalism in college, she does think a lot like them. She actually already has an illustrious SJW career behind her, twice alleging that she was a victim of hate crimes. In the most prominent case, she successfully sued her high school for failing to protect her from a bunch of classmates who were cyberbullying her with racial slurs, over some high school drama stuff. That case actually went national, and the NAACP got involved on her behalf. But she's also a capitalist, looking for an opportunity to run her own business. And then, Gamergate happened. Gamergate, for those who don't remember or weren't there, started in August 2014, when a female game developer named Zoe Quinn was accused by her boyfriend that she cheated on him with critics in the gaming media to garner favorable reviews for the game she developed. This angered the gamers, who suspected for a while that the gaming media is promoting shitty games, caring more about social messaging than the quality of the game, and they reacted to the story by demanding of this media to reform. The dark side of it was a brutal harassment campaign against Quinn, who was demonized and had to go into hiding. But then, the gaming media upped the ante. Instead of addressing the accusations, they launched a coordinated attack on gamers and gaming culture, branding them all as misogynist and bigoted, and claiming that game developers should therefore ignore their wishes. To prove it, they pointed to the harassment that Zoe Quinn and other female gamers were getting. And this was the moment that changed history. This was a travesty. It was always known that in every internet spat, nasty trolls would join in and start harassing both sides. We just ignored these trolls, and argued against those who had actual arguments. The fact that these journalists would use the trolls to smear their critics was scandalous, and that scandal became known as Gamergate. For many people, including myself, this was a wake-up call, the moment we realized what the woke were up to. We realized that on the far side of the left, an authoritarian, anti-liberal ideology was rising up, trying to take over Western culture by infiltrating industries and changing them from within. An anti-SJW coalition formed across the social networks, made of many groups, from both left and right, and these groups began sharing stories and ideas. We realized that we were all being attacked by these SJWs and their hateful ideology. This coalition gave rise to many culture heroes, mainly YouTubers who woke more people up to the danger, and helped them see how absurd and harmful the woke worldview is. It was the beginning of the cultural realignment that produced the world we have today. The woke remained oblivious to it all, mainly because they blocked it all out. Their response to Gamergate was to create filters that would block anyone who disagreed with them. When I became aware of Gamergate, the first thing I did was to follow accounts from both sides on Twitter to learn more about it. Since I am a lefty liberal, I was inclined to take the side of Zoe Quinn's camp. But then I realized that that camp was blocking me for the crime of daring to follow the people who disagreed with them. This was my first sign that those are not people I want to associate with. But the liberal establishment, to its eternal ignominy and ruin, did not bother to try to learn the issue. They automatically took the side of the SJWs, assuming that they were liberals like them. The woke journalists kept portraying the Gamergate crowd as nothing but bigoted trolls, and the liberal media went along with it. In time, this dragged down the entire left. Back in early 2016, however, the left was still firmly entrenched, and they portrayed the anti-SJWs as online bullies and trolls, and discussed how their harassment should be dealt with. This is where Candace Owens saw an opening. She didn't know much about internet culture, never even heard of Gamergate, but she heard that the left is troubled by the question of online harassment, and decided to develop a solution. In April 2016, she launched a Kickstarter campaign to create a website called Social Autopsy, a database of online trolls. The idea was that anyone who gets harassed with hateful comments could upload a screenshot of it to the database. This database would thus be used to catalog all the bad things that troll wrote, and that, somehow, was supposed to expose the true identity behind that troll account. How exactly was it going to do that? Unclear. One thing that becomes obvious right away when you read the description and watch the video they made is that no one involved in this project had any idea how internet culture works. Here is the Kickstarter page. Very representative of wokeness back then, which was dominated by feminism. Or should I say, dominated by anti-patriarchy, before it became dominated by anti-whiteness, then anti-cisnormativity, and now anti-Zionism. This right here is the epitome of what the war called diversity, meaning that it is all women. Because, men are an inferior species that is not part of humanity, but is actually the enemy of humanity that we are trying to destroy. Let's put all men in the database. The description reads, "We know what you are all thinking. There is no way that this many girls run a tech startup. Except we do, and we are about to save the virtual world with it. So listen up. We promise to keep this short and fun." And so it goes on, turning the serious topic of online bullying into some girl power statement, trying to tell us how fun and cool this project is. The internet, however, was not impressed. This was a rare case in which the entire online community seemingly united. Both the SJWs and the anti-SJWs agreed that social autopsy was a terrible idea. They showed that it could easily be abused by anyone wishing to harm others by adding them to the database, and thus branding them a bully and tarnishing their name. All you had to do is clip something out of context, or even just create a fake tweet, and it would be added to the database. It also invited doxing that could be abused. Candace did not provide satisfactory answers to these concerns, and dismissed her critics. They, of course, became even more incensed by that, and Anonymous, 4chan's guard dog of internet freedom, was gearing up to attack the social autopsy website. But then, things took a comical turn when Candace Owens was contacted, first via email and then by phone, by none other than Zoe Quinn. Zoe Quinn, at the time, was busy trying to leverage what happened to her into a career. She created an organization called Crash Override Network, aimed to help those who suffered from online abuse, and was touted by the media as an expert on the subject, which earned her contracts with social media sites such as Twitter to help them battle the trolls. But even she didn't like the idea of social autopsy. Her approach was to help people deal with harassment, not to wipe out the trolls altogether like Candace aimed to do. Over a long phone call, she tries to explain to Candace that her approach is taking it too far and could be detrimental to the fight against harassment. She also gives her a friendly warning that internet trolls are intending to attack her. But Candace, being Candace, refuses to listen. She is convinced that her database is a truly unique and wonderful idea, and doesn't believe that anyone who was a victim of harassment, like Zoe claimed to be, would sincerely have a problem with it. Quinn's attempts to come over as some expert on the subject only annoys her further, and feels like a white woman being condescending towards her, white-splaining a subject she felt herself quite an expert on already. Eventually, according to Candace, Zoe breaks down and starts to cry, telling her that if she proceeds, she is going to ruin everything. They fail to reach any kind of agreement, and Candace is left puzzled. A feeling that soon grows into total befuddlement, because later that evening, the social autopsy website suddenly starts to receive dozens of nasty messages, including many misogynist and racist messages aimed at Candace herself. At the same time, their official Twitter is bombarded with similar messages. And this seems very odd to her. Remember, Candace has no idea how internet culture works. She doesn't realize that her Kickstarter has been the talk of the day on YouTube, 4chan, Reddit, and so forth. She doesn't know how fast these things can be turned into an angry mob. She doesn't understand why all of this is happening to her all at once. All she knows is that shortly after receiving a warning from Zoe Quinn, the warning came true, and her attackers somehow make the same criticisms that Zoe made. She suspects that Zoe is the one coordinating these attacks, to scare her off. So she goes online and Googles Zoe Quinn to see what she can learn about her. And, what do you know? It turns out that the web is full of posts about Zoe Quinn, about how she is a manipulative liar, about how she falsely accuses people of harassing her in order to shut them up, about how she tries to destroy people, and all the other things, both real and imaginary, posted about her by the Gamergate crowd. Of course, she doesn't realize these posts are all made by Gamergaters, but she does learn a little about Gamergate, about how it is the big bad wolf that harasses little girls, and she notes that Zoe seems to be heavily involved in it. By the next morning, Candace feels that she has figured it all out. In one eureka moment, it all comes clear to her. It is so obvious. She realizes that Zoe Quinn, wait for it, is the leader of Gamergate. I am not making this up, guys. I will link below to stuff that can still be found online, from which one can piece together the entire story. The explanation is quite simple. Zoe, Candace reasons, wanted to make money by becoming the #1 fighter against online harassment. So she secretly created an army of internet trolls, and this army did the whole Gamergate thing, which now allows Zoe to present herself as the ultimate victim, and also as the solution. But she was afraid that Social Autopsy, my super high-tech website, might unmask the true identity of these trolls, and expose the whole scheme. This is what she meant by "you are going to ruin everything." Therefore, she sent her troll army to harass me, thinking it will scare me off. But I am Candace Owens, I will not back down. Oh no, I will tell the world all about this bitch. First thing, she goes on social media to tell her woke friends about how she was attacked by Zoe Quinn and her army of Gamergate trolls. But then, something unfathomable happens. The woke, her friends, do not listen and believe. That's right. Here was a black woman who had the personal life experience of being attacked by Zoe Quinn, the leader of Gamergate, but this wasn't good enough to convince them. I've never seen a worse display of putting facts and logic over feelings and not checking your privilege. Instead, like a bunch of literal Nazis, they start explaining to a female black victim why she is wrong. And if this disgraceful display of all lives matter isn't enough, some liberal media publications run articles ridiculing her. And, most crushing of all, Kickstarter informs her that they are pulling her project. Faced with all this backlash, and with everyone telling her she has no idea what she's talking about, Candace comes to the only logical conclusion, that the conspiracy must be a lot deeper than she realized. And then, with perfect timing, another character enters the comedy. Randi Lee Harper was already well known in Gamergate circles as one of the nastiest woke feminists out there, one whose behavior did a lot to keep fueling the anti-feminist sentiment that was sweeping the internet at the time. She was also involved in the attempts to battle online harassment, working on the technical side of it, and she too presented herself as an expert on the subject. The anti-SJWs actually agreed that she was an expert on the issue of online harassment, as she was notorious for constantly dishing it to anyone who wasn't woke enough for her. And as an expert, she was also alarmed by Social Autopsy. Cynics would say that she simply realized that if such a database existed, she would have more entries in it than anyone else. But we are not cynics here. She couldn't keep silent to what was going on, so on the third day of the scandal, she issued an open letter to Candace on her blog. It is still there. She first states her credentials, and actually takes credit for creating that aforementioned filter that blocks anyone who dared to even listen to anti-SJWs, the filter that was part of my awakening. I didn't know this until I made this video. Then she proceeds to explain to her, like to a little child, what online harassment is and why her database is a really bad idea. On the way, she calls her a train wreck, a fluffhead, and a fucking idiot. Granted, all of this is warranted, and she actually does a good job exposing what a liar and a dumbass Candace Owens was, even back then. It just wasn't a very wise move. Naturally, Candace takes this open letter to heart. Believe it or not, it actually makes her reevaluate her views, and she realizes she was wrong to claim that Zoe Quinn was the leader of Gamergate. From here on, she starts claiming that Zoe Quinn and Randi Lee Harper are leading Gamergate together. As you can imagine, all this time she's being egged on by the Gamergate people, who are amused to no end by the situation, and keep providing her with more ammunition. But really, it is Harper herself who provides her with the biggest affirmation of her suspicions. As the last paragraph of her open letter states, "You blamed your Kickstarter getting shut down on trolls. You're wrong. That was us. As long as you're willfully harming other people by creating shitty, uninformed products, while kicking the shit out of anyone who tries to help you, we're going to keep getting you shut down." Well, this is all that Candace needs, the final proof that it was indeed Zoe and Randi behind it all. She promises to write a blog post that will expose them to the world, and destroy them once and for all. When you go back and read some of the things that the woke themselves said about it at the time, one thing that stands out is the frustration of realizing that no matter what they did, they just couldn't get Owens to listen to reason. Some evil bastard has convinced Candace that as a black woman, she is a perennial victim, and people are out to get her. He also convinced her that she should never listen to men or to white people, because everything they say is just mansplaining and whitesplaining. He further convinced her that she should trust her personal experience and feelings, and disregard any facts and logic that contradict them. Finally, he convinced her that there are systemic forces out there that are controlling her life, and she should expose these forces and liberate herself from them. If only the woke could figure out who was that douchebag who molded Candace's mind to think this way, maybe they could have gotten to her and changed her view. But they never figured out who it was, and so they only ended up creating yet another Gamergate culture hero. It didn't happen right away, though. Back in April 2016, the entire internet rejected Owens. That big reveal that she promised amounted to a long, very well written blog post in which she told her side of the story. She ended it with, "Indeed, we are looking at what may be the tip of an iceberg, and one that I am now, for the first time, focused on exploring. Beginning with Miss Zoe Quinn and Randi Lee Harper. Stay tuned." The internet, however, was not convinced. After this, Candace just disappeared, at least for a while. Before we learn what happened to her next, there is one question that remains to be answered, a question that no one, at the time, bothered to ask. Who attacked Candace Owens? And here comes the twist. The reason I looked into it, when I heard about this story a year later, was that I thought the joke was that 4chan attacked her, and she went and blamed it on Zoe Quinn. I thought this was hilarious, a real-life comedy of errors, so I wanted to learn more. But after looking into it, I changed my mind. I think Candace was actually right, at least about this. It was Zoe Quinn, and some of her woke friends, who carried out the attack. And this makes the story even funnier. Why do I think that? The first reason is that no one ever took credit for the attack. It is strange that it happened all at once, and suggests that the attack was, if not orchestrated, at least triggered by something. When such a thing happens online, there is always a smoking gun, a YouTube video, a 4chan thread, something that you can point to as a trigger. In this case, all there was were some videos talking about why social autopsy is a bad idea, and some 4chan and Reddit threads suggesting doing something about it, but yet to move to the stage of deciding what. And if it was 4chan, wouldn't Anonymous be boasting for months that they saved the internet from this threat? It doesn't add up. Secondly, when I looked at the messages sent to Owens, I noted that they were disgustingly racist and misogynist, yes, but they were not funny. I mean, it was always known that if 4chan attacks you, at least you can have a bit of a laugh. When 4chan learned I was a Jew and a liberal, they immediately asked me if I know how you can tell a black Jew. They sit in the back of the ashtray. This didn't feel like 4chan. It felt like someone trying to pretend they are 4chan. Candace also pointed out that the attackers all went by European male names, and that the names often suggested misogyny, or had something to do with gaming. It really does feel like someone was trying to frame the Gamergate people. Plus, according to Candace, while all messages came either to the Social Autopsy official email or to their Twitter account, there was one message that came to the email address she gave Zoe Quinn that wasn't publicly known. It was a curious message, sent by yet another guy who went by the name Chris Me Not You, and it was a message that warns about a forthcoming 4chan attack, and that more such attacks will come if she doesn't cease her operation. It can't really decide, though, if it is a warning or a threat. Again, if Candace was telling the truth, it feels like a frame job. Finally, a few months after this incident, it came out that Zoe Quinn, Randi Lee Harper, and many of the other most vocal enemies of Gamergate were all part of a chat group in which they coordinated. Zoe was the head of the group that was formed around her Crash Override network, and she took care to erase all the logs, but some survived and were leaked. The leak revealed that the group had a list of people they wanted to destroy, by any means necessary, including people who had nothing to do with harassment, but were not critical enough of Gamergate. It is very reasonable to believe that once she failed to convince Candace to pull her project, Zoe activated this group to attack her under the guise of Gamergate trolls. If this is indeed what happened, then it backfired spectacularly, and ended up creating Candace Owens. Yes, folks, Zoe Quinn isn't just the woman who gave us Gamergate, but also the woman who gave us Blexit. She did more than anyone to destroy the woke left. And as for her chat group, well, it didn't take long after that for its members to have a falling out, to the point where Randi Lee Harper added some of them to her infamous blockbot. And this fallout was also the end of Crash Override, and Zoe's career as an expert on online harassment. Given this information, you might be thinking, hang on, maybe it shows that Candace wasn't that crazy after all. Well, true, her naivete about internet culture may have actually helped her glean the truth here, where everyone else just naturally assumed it was 4chan. But that's not what was comical about her actions. The ridiculous part is the Alex Jones-type story that she immediately concocted around it. Pretending to be members of another group in order to frame that group is something that, unfortunately, has become quite commonplace in the years since. We've come to expect it. But we never perceive it as part of some grand conspiracy. It's just a tactic in the culture wars. Candace's mind works differently, and she refuses to learn the subject and try to find more reasonable explanations. For instance, one of her arguments was that the anger against Social Autopsy was contained to the gaming community alone, which, in her mind, proved that Zoe alerted her gamer friends and enlisted them to bring her down. She didn't realize that when people would talk of the Gamergate community, they were not talking just about gamers, but about the anti-SJW coalition, a broad alliance of many groups that span the political and cultural spectrums. Candace's hubris prevents her from forming common-sense theories about reality. Here's what I think happened. Zoe had a good thing going. She and her friends managed to convince the establishment that they were the good guys in the Gamergate scandal, and she leveraged that into achieving expert status on online harassment, which gave her money and power. She was probably honest about wanting to fight harassment, but she and her woke friends also wanted to use that power to cancel Gamergate people. When she saw the internet's reaction to social autopsy, she was afraid it might paint the battle against online harassment in a bad light, make the establishment more suspicious of it, and make her lose that power, lose the opportunity to defeat her Gamergate foes. This is what she meant when she said it was going to ruin everything. So she tried to shut it down, eventually setting her friends on Candace. That's the extent of the conspiracy. Back to Candace Owens. She next started to associate with Mike Cernovich, back then a leading voice on the rising MAGA movement, who groomed her into becoming a conservative internet celebrity. He surely realized what a boon it would be to have an eloquent, attractive and feisty black woman who will talk about making the switch from left to right. In mid-2017, she launched a YouTube channel called Red Pill Black, talking about how she was red-pilled into seeing how the Democratic Party is using black Americans to its needs, without doing anything to help them. Her rise was meteoric, and she quickly became the new star on the anti-SJW front. The next natural thing to do was to go on the Rubin Report, the talk show that catapulted many anti-SJWs into fame, and tell her story. She was highly impressive and charming, and soon had Dave eating out of the palm of her hand.
And she started crying, and she said, if you don't, it's going to ruin everything. And she told me that she spends time on 4chan because of what she does, and she saw that people were already talking about my project, and if I didn't pull it, these anonymous white men and Trump supporters, you have to remember this was during the election cycle, were going to come after me and dox my family, which essentially means put up their personal information so people can try to kill them. That's what she says.
So she said this is what they are going to do. So she was oddly threatening you with being doxxed, but it wasn't she that was going to dox you.
She thought I was a total moron, I think, and I'm like, okay, I'm not pulling my project. She hangs up the phone crying. Within 2 hours, we were absolutely inundated. About 4,000 emails via Kickstarter, like, nigger, 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 die, 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 pull your project. And they have these super obvious screen names like, Trump or die, Trump 2020, white man behind computer.
That's a good one. That guy's always tweeting me.
So, and I'm like, is she kidding? All men, by the way. Everyone was like, Dave at, Bob at, no woman. And magically, everything that she tried to warn me about came true within a couple of hours of me refusing to pull my project. So I tweet very quickly, again, not really knowing the bread and butter of the Gamergate scandal. I said, all I can say is that 100% after speaking with Zoe Quinn, this girl was never harassed. She's doing the harassing. And the next morning I woke up, The Guardian, The Washington Post, and New York Magazine were all calling me. I was a nobody with a Kickstarter that was 3 minutes long. Kickstarter pulled my project, and the next day, big media. And in my head, I'm thinking, journalism major, Washington Post, amazing. Like, at that point, I considered myself a liberal, Democrat, if you will. And so I was like, great, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to tell them about this girl. They're going to write the piece,
I have a bad feeling where this is about to go.
This is about to go completely sideways.
Okay.
So I speak to a person named Jesse Singal. He works for New York Magazine, and he's like, yeah, I saw your tweets.
He's not a fan of mine.
No, he is a journalist hitman, as I like to call them. And he speaks to me, he's like, yeah, I saw your tweets. I just want to speak to you about what happened, super nice. Yeah, and I tell him everything. I'm like, yeah, Zoe called me up, open and shut case. Obviously, she told me to pull my project. I didn't, and then I got harassed. He instead writes this article, and the tone of it was essentially trying to gaslight me. Oh, she seemed like a nice girl, but she got dragged into this conspiracy theory. Zoe actually is a girl that was harassed, And at that point, I realized, oh my God, like the media is going to try to kill my project, and these journalists are absolutely lying.
So wait a minute. So did you actually create?
No.
Right. So that's the thing. So you didn't even create this technology.
They had actually done their job as journalists and asked me questions about what I had created. They would have left me alone.
But all right. And then Kickstarter pulled it?
They pulled it. Didn't give me a reason. They just pulled the project off. An anti-bullying. And could you do anything that's more innocent or more PG? An anti-bullying. Hey, we're raising money want to try out this, anti-bullying tech startup type thing. We had nothing but a splash page at that point.
Yeah. All right. So, it's funny because hearing this, it all sounds incredible. And yet I've personally been part of some of this stuff. I've obviously sat across from people from Brett Weinstein and Colin Moriarty, people that have been through this monster.
Right.
This dishonest media, the craziness online, all of this stuff. So, okay, so this is all happening to you. When did you start piecing it together?
Instantly. The second the Washington Post called me and Caitlin Dewey was trying to cut off the legs of the funding, I realized I had to go back and watch the Kickstarter and say, what did I say that set this off? And I realized it was that one line. They thought that I actually, and then her saying, you're going to ruin everything. I pieced it all together instantly, and I realized that my friends were my enemies, and my enemies were my friends, and the only people that covered the story extensively and accurately were the white nationalist Breitbart.
This is Candace in a nutshell. Taught by the woke that she is born a victim of systemic forces, her mind is conditioned to perceive the world this way. And if the world doesn't act as expected, it doesn't mean that the whole belief in systems is wrong. It just means that the evil system is structured differently from what she thought, and she must figure out how it is really structured. And there should also be some blonde bitch behind it all, because blondes are evil. But Candace did evolve somewhat. Having time to learn more about internet culture, she now understood that it was silly to claim that Zoe Quinn was the leader of Gamergate and orchestrated everything. She used the time to think about it and come up with a new story. Sounds good. Maybe she isn't that crazy. Let's see what the new story is.
Yeah.
All right, wait, there's so much here, and it's so related to everything, and we haven't even fully got to your political awakening yet.
Yeah.
So first off, I love that you said they're hitmen.
Yes, journalists
not
are
journalists.
hitmen. Yep.
Yeah, because the phrase, I mentioned it to you right before we started, I've been saying they're activists, not journalists, but they're hitmen.
Absolutely.
Is what they really are. There's so many examples of this. That guy you mentioned, it's not even worth mentioning his name again.
Yeah.
I mean, he's attacked me on Twitter for nonsense, and it's just all, it's like, you guys, you're not even pretending.
No, they are hired, and the higher ups definitely know about it. They are hired to take people out and to take businesses out that, are a threat to them for some reason. And my threat was that they actually thought that I had created technology that was going to unmask trolls. Imagine what that would have done in the heat of the election. Hillary Clinton had millions of followers on Twitter. What if I actually created something and said, actually, that's all coming from, that's like one person, they've created all these accounts. She's actually not winning this election. What if I found out on Twitter that the person that was writing Black Lives Matter saying, die, 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 nigger, nigger, niggers, was actually someone that worked in Hillary's campaign to create this environment. So they were actually terrified that I created something, that was going to ruin everything.
That's right, folks. Hillary Clinton was the blonde bitch behind it all. She and the DNC were running a scam, employing numerous trolls to portray GOP voters in a bad light and affect the elections. And they were afraid that my technologically advanced, state-of-the-art, supercomputery database was going to do what no one else could and unmask their plot. So they set their attack dog, Zoe Quinn, on me. This was my first introduction to Candace, and I thought that she was quite lovely, but when she got to this part, I was like...
See, now that's some bullshit.
Dave Rubin would get a lot of flack for his soft interviewing style, for seemingly believing anything his guests were saying and not pushing back. But I actually thought it was perfect. This isn't mass media, where the consumers are passive, so the interviewer has to do all the work for them. This is social media, in which the consumers have the ability to react, so the best thing for the interviewer to do is to let the guest feel comfortable enough to lay down their entire worldview. Rubin did that with Candace, and right away, there were people on the anti-SJW camp saying, hang on a minute, isn't that the social autopsy chick? Reaction videos immediately popped up, questioning Candace and her motives. The suspicions grew when it was revealed that the social autopsy database was still operative. Owens, true to her nature, pushed back, branding all her critics as paid DNC plants. This led to a legendary debate between her and Blair White, still the catfight of the century, and the bottom line was that Candace was rejected by the anti-SJW crowd. But she was embraced by MAGA. It was actually Charlie Kirk who took her in, and legitimized her. She found a home on the right, and did very well for herself. Did well for the right, I would say. She was definitely instrumental in breaking the taboo and allowing more black voices to come out as conservative. But I never thought that she changed. She still had that same mindset, she just tweaked it a little to appeal to right-wingers who had a similar mindset. Instead of the systemic systems of systematic systemhood, they believe in deep state forces that control us, and foreign elements that try to destroy our nation from within. Candace just latched on to that, and found a big audience. And now she's doing to the right what she did to the SJWs. Again there's a grand conspiracy. Again it is something that only she can see. Again the people attacking her are the proof that she's onto something. Again she is going to reveal the truth in time. Again there is a blonde woman at the center of it all. I'm just waiting for the big reveal that Erica Kirk is the secret head of Mossad. So, to answer the question I posed in the video title, who red-pilled Candace Owens, the answer is that she did it to herself. Her mind, molded by the woke left and then soaked in the atmosphere of the conspiratorial right, took her further and further into the realms of far-right lunacy. There is one big difference between then and now, though. Back then, the entire SJW community disowned her and rejected her wild theories. This time, she finds a lot of people who believe her. Which means that there is a big chunk of the American right nowadays that is even dumber than the 2016 SJWs. And if you are on the American right, I think you should ask yourself, how did this happen?